Hello. Well, I realised I never actually gave a completion video, like a resolution video regarding the trauma crisis that I went through, which inspired the series Unpacking Trauma. But I never sort of actually shared some kind of closure regarding my experience. Because, the whole aim of the series was to show, like, the importance of addressing trauma, like, really going right into it and experiencing it all fully, experiencing whatever it is that comes to you through that trauma, but, with this vision of like, but I can heal this, I'm not going to ignore anything that comes up, but also I'm not gonna linger in an experience any longer than I feel is healthy for me. So so it's now it must be maybe 2 months, getting close to 2 months, about 2 months since a tree crushed my bus while I was in there, and it was just a much more shocking experience than it was just a shocking experience, and it really affected me really quite severely. So, initially I was experiencing I would experience panic attacks, a lot of flashbacks of the experience, which was sort of, the flashback could sort of draw out some kind of fearful response. It might have been a panic attack sometimes just, a total paralysis, and a real emotional volatility. I was sort of very intense in every way. But, I found that, it just kept easing off all the time. I had to keep taking steps forward, like to move forward in life in a very practical sense. I had to reestablish a whole new lifestyle, like just like that. There was sort of no time to really think about it and marinate on it and be like, what would I like to do? It's kind of like, oh my God, I got to do something like right now. And, I really had to just trust my intuition and go with the flow around me, and that's something when it is like a massive trauma experience, like you do have to go with the flow, like if a bomb has just dropped on your house, like the flow's sort of gonna be like moving you out of there, moving you out of the danger zone, to where it's safe. And I can't say what that flow will be, but for me it was about letting go of bubbles, my gypsy bus, my lifestyle in that way, and moving into a totally new lifestyle, which I'm now living. So, what I'd like to sort of point out is that it just kept incrementally easing off, but that was always I kept making these decisions. Like, there was a day when I went into, I experienced very, very deep depression, and it was something I used to live in depression when I was experiencing a lot of trauma full time, and I never quite knew I could get myself out of it. And so that day when I went into a depression, I was like, wow, I really don't want this. I've lived like that before. This can't be. I'm not going to live with mental health issues for the rest of my life. I don't want it. I'm not saying nobody else can do that, but I was very firm in that, I will move through this. I'm not going to let this be the new me, like that's the past me, in my opinion. And so I moved through it. I did everything necessary that I could, got I think I got a really quick fire appointment with my psychologist, and I invoked light. I did a lot of work, mantras and everything, just to clear that energy, and also to set my will like, this is not the new reality. This is not the way I want to experience my life. I was very clear on that. So, the whole time it was always just, like the panic attacks. I had them. They're not a nice experience. They're really not. It's not a pleasant experience. Physically, it's just you're shaking all over, and mentally and emotionally, it's not a stable way to be. So, I didn't experience too many of them because I was like, oh, I don't want this. I don't want to keep going into this. So, I just learned when I was getting a flashback, because the flashbacks I couldn't quite control quite so much, but I would just choose, once I'd sort of experienced a couple of panic attacks, I'd just sort of choose, like, I'm going to breathe my way through this. I'd do a meditation or invoke light again. I would just be very proactive to change my energy field. Like, rather than be pulled into that panic attack, it was like, I've got to make some very conscious choices on how am I going to cope with this vision I'm having. I know it's not real and everything. So I did, and I used all the tools that I have available to me. So, it's very important to work with the tools that you have available to you too, and to look for more, and there's a lot of stuff out there, there's meditation apps and things like that. There's all of these YouTube videos. There's so many resources available to help you through these things. So, just work out what works for you, and use the tools, use the steps that you can have forward. If you want to go into the experience and stay in it, then, that's your choice. I'm just here to say it doesn't have to be permanent, and that you can process every last drop of it. And I'm not saying, that I will be or you will be totally PTSD free from any trauma event, but the more you teach yourself to rise out of, the fear reaction to something that reminds you of a trauma experience, the easier it is when it happens again. When you get triggered again, you're just like, oh, wait, yep, I'm just reacting, and I can work through this. So, I'm even talking beyond, what happened with the tree falling on my bus. Like, I think all the time we get triggered by experiences around us, and there's no right or wrong. And when we get triggered, if we have a reaction that feels that a fear-based reaction to something, it might be something somebody says to us, someone we care for and love a lot, and they might say something that triggers a reaction, and is, it's okay, like, just recognize, like, whoa, I've just had a big reaction here, like, and I don't feel real good. Do what you do, and just, use the resources available. It might be a particular friend you can call, invoke the light, say prayers, mantras, meditate, yoga, chop wood, whatever it is. Do the things that can sort of shift you out of the fear-based response and come into the place where you can exercise your higher order mind to sort of, you begin to look at it and pull it apart, and to see, like, well, what can I learn from this? Because that's ultimately what this is all about. It's like, what can I learn? What can I learn from this experience? And one of the major things I learned from my experience, there was a lot of stuff I learnt from it, but sort of something I learnt very directly. And I feel like this was the final part of my resolution when, so the experience of, suddenly bang, just losing everything, financially and my shelter and, everything, just everything that was stable was just blown apart. So it amplified this incredibly fearful, insecure part of me where I've always had this, and I'm sure a lot of people have this too, where, there's this fear of the future, like, what if this happens? And so the what if happened to me. And so it kind of like, really amplified that fear. I was living with it day by day, like, wow, like, what's going to happen. I was staying in a granny flat at that point, and I'd only been there for a very short amount of time, just a few weeks, and and I knew it's not forever. And I thought, what am I going to do when Julie decides, it's time she's got to leave. I'm going to have to leave too, and I was feeling scared. But then, I was just sort of walking along, that nice space where, you're not sort of just enjoying the world around me, and I just realized, like, the only bad thing that happened with that experience was the actual tree falling on the bus, the actual trauma event. But, and even that I wouldn't say is bad. It was just an experience. It was just something shocking that happened. It was definitely shocking, no doubt. Anyone would be shocked in that sort of experience. But everything that came from it, everything just moved on. It wasn't necessarily always easy, but everything flowed on. The money that I needed, I couldn't compensate for the actual financial loss. It was impossible. But what I needed to move forward, it came, and so, I'd make an effort of asking for help where possible, and taking practical measures too within my own world. And then, just allowing the flow to sort of come to me. So I realized everything worked out fine. You know what I mean? If you're giving to the world, if you're giving of your heart and soul, and, just always letting yourself flow, and, like that pay it forward sort of idea too, I'd often give money, even though I don't really have much money, but I'd give money to people or organizations when I felt like, oh, I've got a little bit to spare. I'd like to give it because I know one day that'll flow back. And, it has been flowing back in one way or another. So anyway, my resolution that day, and I realized, look, the mother, the universe will always provide. If we're giving, what we give, it will come back. And just, I finally made peace. I just made peace with the divine, and I realized, the law of abundance, it's a real thing. Like, it will flow back to us, if we're giving to the world, what we give, it will flow back to us multiplied. And so I thought, when the time comes to leave this granny flat, it's okay, everything will work out. And I must say, when a week later, when that call happened, like, a family emergency happened for my friend, and she's like, I'm so sorry, I've got to go 2 weeks. And I was like, But, I was kind of like part freaking out, but also deep inside of me, I knew things would work out. I just trusted that. And eventually it did. And I've ended up, in the same place by the beach, in a beautiful place only 100 meters from the beach. And, I have a place to stay. I have my own little independent studio, and wow, like, everything did flow on fine. So, that was like the major lesson, to just finally make peace with, like, sometimes some really difficult things do happen on this planet, things that we can't foresee, and things that we can't plan for, and things that, are not necessarily very nice experiences. Some difficult things happen for us, but, I just made peace with, like, this does happen, but, everything works out, everything flows on just fine. So, and that's what happened with, the actual injurious nature of the trauma too. Like, it's all worked out fine. Like, I wouldn't say I'm in injury at all anymore. I'm just moving forward with a lot of positivity. So that's, I think that is a nice sort of conclusion for discussing how we can learn from a trauma experience, and how I have learnt from my one, that we can move forward and that we can resolve. But it's all through that acceptance, compassion for self, but also determination to keep moving forwards. Okay.